Okay, I believe we are live. Hello, everyone. This is Councilwoman Mai Vang coming to you live in our Heart and Hustle studio from my home in Meadowview. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and really just want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for joining us from your home, your office, wherever you're at. Thank you so much for joining our monthly live chat. I hope all of you are staying healthy and safe. Fall is here. It's getting a little chilly, so make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Before we begin our monthly live chat, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. It's something that our office typically do when we host events, whether it's virtual or in person. So I will just do the land acknowledgement before we jump into our live chat. To the original people of this land, the Nisenan people, the Southern Maidu Valley and Plains Miwok, Patwin and Wintu's peoples, and the people of Wilton Rancheria, Sacramento's only federally recognized tribe. May we acknowledge and honor the Native people who came before us and still walk beside us today on these ancestral lands by choosing to gather today in the active practice of acknowledgement and appreciation for Sacramento's indigenous peoples, history, contributions, and lives. Again, thank you so much for joining us today for our monthly live chat. Today is the last day of October, and this month, as many of you know, is also Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And this year, and this month in particular, our office, we wanted to take this time to really center this issue and bring on some amazing, fierce community leaders and advocates on the ground to share the work that they've been doing to address domestic violence in our community. It is October, it is the end of October, but this is something that will be live, something that we'll be able to share out, not just past October, but every month, every day, right? While October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, this is important work that needs to be done every single day. But this month, though, is a powerful reminder of just the work we still have ahead to ensure that we have communities, that we have neighborhoods, and just environments where all of us are safe and empowered and really free from domestic violence, from gender-based violence. I do want to take this moment because you see all our incredible panelists on here virtually to say thank you to them. Thank you so much for joining me today, joining our community in this virtual space. And also, I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you for the work that you do for Sacramentans every day to ensure that families and individuals can truly reach their full potential. Many of you have been on the front lines over the years, and while we have made some progress to support victims and survivors, I know there's still so much more work ahead to be done. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for your service and your commitment to this important issue to really ensure that our communities are truly safe. So with that, we'll start with the first question. I didn't get a chance to introduce each of you, but would love for you to introduce yourself. If you can share a little bit about yourself, your name, your job title, your preferred pronouns, your organization, but most importantly, your story of why this work is important to you and your organization. So we will start with, why don't we start with Beth?
Hi, I'm Beth Hassett, and Weave was founded in 1978. I started at Weave in I've been the CEO for 17 years now. This work for a number of reasons. I think anybody who comes to this work has a I witnessed friends of mine experience domestic and sexual violence. I wanted to do something about it, and I also had came with the deep stake, the world equitable and fair for women, for marginalized communities by this type of violence, and have been doing this work and am proud to challenge our community to take action and make a difference in the lives.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Beth, really just for your service and your work at Weave. Just want to double check really quick. I think, Beth, we got most of what you said, but there was some cutting in and out. Did the panelists hear a little cutting in and out? It might just be me. I'm not sure, a little bit. Okay. Beth, we were able to make out most of what you said, so that's good. But just wanted to let you know, because I want to make sure that if we have any technical difficulties, we're able to address that. But thank you so much. We were
Okay.
able to pick up most of what you shared. So
Okay.
thank you. Why don't we go with Laura?
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for hosting this. So my name's Laura Vu. I use she and her pronouns. I am a project manager of Chan BOF. And it's a quite long name. So the acronym for Chan stands for California Hmong Advocates Network, and BOF stands for Building Our Future. Both of these networks actually were started out as grassroots in 2013. Chan is actually co-founded by Hmong women advocates in California that were working in DV organizations and shelters, and wanted to network and build together to really support each other's leadership and push our DV advocacy field to be more culturally responsive. Building Our Future is a global community campaign. That's where I come in. I've been part of the Building Our Future campaign, really organizing not just statewide, but nationally and also internationally with Hmong advocates and organizers around promoting awareness of abusive international marriages, which is a form of domestic violence that exists in all communities, but in our specific communities, it really looks like how Hmong Americans are actually going overseas and engaging in abusive international relationships and marriages with younger folks in Southeast Asia. And so that's the backstory of Chan and BOF. And in 2019, we formed the Peace Collaborative, in which we focus our work in Sacramento, Merced, and Fresno, really employing employing community engagement strategies to move our community to take responsibility that this issue is a community issue. It's not just the burden falls onto victims and survivors. It's not just on the families that are involved, but it is really everyone in the community is responsible too. And so really building community capacity to address this issue and really surface community-based types of solutions. The backstory of why this is important to me, of course, I've also witnessed domestic violence in my own families, in my own community, people that I know and love, as well as even the work that I do. Whenever you do work in the community, you're going to be bound to meet victims and survivors who need support. And so I've actually met a lot of really amazing and awesome and powerful people through this work. And so this is actually my first full-time job being paid to do this work. The last 8-9 years I've been doing it as an organizer, but I've been a part of the Chan BOF since the beginning when it formed in 2019 as a steering committee member. And then I transitioned into the project manager role last year in April.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing your story. And I also feel very honored to have worked alongside you as well as fellow organizers. And I'm just really grateful for everything that you're doing in our community. So thank you so much for sharing your story and a little bit about Chan BOF. Melody?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here, Council Member. So I'm Melody Crispoden. I use she, her, Aya pronouns, and I am a prevention specialist from the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. The California Partnership to End Domestic Violence is California's recognized domestic violence coalition, and we represent over 1,000 advocates, organizations, and allied groups throughout the state. And we use public policy, communications, and capacity building efforts to align prevention and intervention strategies to advance social change. And we believe that by sharing expertise, advocates and policymakers can end domestic violence. And we've been doing this for nearly 40 years. I actually started with the partnership in January, so I'm fairly new to the organization. But prior to that, I worked at a dual domestic violence and sexual assault organization for 10 years in Los Angeles. And I think that what brought me to this work is just the fact that I think domestic violence touches all of us in various ways, and we've all been impacted by it, whether or not we realize it. But really, I focus on prevention. And so I think that doing the activism and organizing work around prevention is really what's going to lead us to a world in which we have eliminated domestic violence. And so I'm just really passionate about this work. Both of my parents are immigrants with activism in their roots and in their families and my ancestry. And so I'm just happy to be able to do this every day across California.
That's great, Melody. Thank you so much for your service, even though you're a little bit new to the organization. I really appreciate you just sharing your background and just your commitment to this work as well. So thank you so much, and really happy to actually have the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence here with us today. A really great resource and network for our community. So thank you so much. And let's go with Shane. I believe, Shane, you're the last. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for hosting this. My name is Shane Long. I am Director of Operations here at My Sister's House. My Sister's House started over 20 years ago when 3 domestic violence incidents resulted in deaths in the API Asian Pacific Islander community. Local leaders got together, local API leaders got together to really try to answer the question and brainstorm reasons that were leading to these deaths. And so that was how My Sister's House was formed. What sets us apart is that we really focus on being culturally responsive. We're trying to tackle and trying to understand and providing services that really try to be considerate of where folks are coming from. What are things in their background, barriers that prevent them from reaching out for services and keep them from leaving an abusive relationship. So similar to Laura, I grew up Hmong. I grew up with observing and witnessing domestic violence related incidents in families and friends, and really observed that and thought to myself, okay, there's got to be a better way to resolve conflict among couples that are resorting to abuse. And so that is my why. I'm here to be a change agent in this community, and look forward to working with all of you and discussing this.
Thank you so much, Shane. So thank you so much, everyone, for introducing yourself and giving us just a little glimpse into the organization that you work for and that you're serving. Before we begin the discussion, I think it might be good to just level set for those who are actually watching at home. I wanted to ask each and every one of you, and feel free, I think I'm just going to I'll call on one of you first. But I do think it's important to level set as we talk about DV, domestic violence in our community. And wanted to ask you all, how would you define domestic violence, and what role does your organization play in addressing this? And so let me start with, I'll start with Laura.
Hi. So as part of DV Awareness Month, we've been actually going through these terms and definitions with our community. And domestic violence is also known as intimate partner violence. And so it really is the violence between 2 intimate partners in an intimate relationship. When we talk about in Chambia West work and we educate our community about domestic violence, we also bring in the context around family and gender-based violence. And so and one reason why we do this is so that our community members recognize that there are many actually different contexts of violence that victims and survivors of domestic violence actually can experience just beyond their intimate partner relationships. So for an example, right, in our community, some of our victims and survivors who identify as specifically cis hetero women in a cis hetero relationship with their partner could also, and if they're married, they could also be experiencing family violence. And so that's important for us to think about if their family if they even have family support to leave a relationship. And then there's also gender-based violence, right? If you identify as LGBTQ, as a woman, or even like as a man, right? The violence based on your gender also impacts whether or not you would have the support or the help to leave a relationship. And so we bring in those contexts for people to understand that, to really center survivors when we want to support them and want to provide help for them.
Thanks, Laura. Beth, did you have anything else to add? The question is, how would you define domestic violence, and what role does your organization play in addressing this?
People to know is that there are multiple types of domestic, very fixated on physical violence, and there are domestic violence that we talk to folks about, including emotional abuse, technological abuse, financial abuse, and spiritual abuse. The average person may or may not have experienced any physical abuse, and they often think that what's happening to them counts, and they don't seek help. So I think that's one of the best messages, is that often it's much more insidious to be experiencing some of these other really, cut you to your core. At Weave, we're who have identified as being a victim or survivor, and providing them with support. We're also going upstream and working with youth and children to prevent in the first place. And I think that's a really critical role for all. And let's stop this before it happens, and let's get to impressionable youth, abusers, or victims themselves.
Thank you so much, Beth, for sharing that. Just speaking of youth and young people as well, I think I'm going to ask Melody the same question, because I know that she does some organizing just with our young people as well. So, Melody, do you have anything to add in terms of the definition of DV and what your organization is doing?
Sure. So I would add that domestic violence is really about a pattern of behavior, and it's really when a person using abuse uses those different types of abuse that Beth just talked about in order to maintain power and control over their partner. So it's really about this imbalance of power that's going on with one person using abuse to maintain that power. And in terms of what our organization does to address domestic violence, our focus is really on equipping advocates to do their jobs. And so we help provide capacity building, training, and technical assistance so that we can support advocates, preventionists, clinicians in doing whatever it is that they need to do at the local level to address and prevent domestic violence. And we also focus on policy advocacy. And so we help to work at the state level to make sure that the laws that we have in place are really working to address and prevent domestic violence and support survivors.
Thanks, Melody. Thank you so much for sharing that. And really, on the advocacy and policy piece was just as critical as the work on the ground, right? Because it impacts how actually organization even navigate the system, right, to support victims and survivors. So thank you so much, Shane.
Yeah, just reiterating what everyone has already shared, the fact that so many automatically think that domestic violence really is just physical, and there's so much more to that. There's, as Beth has mentioned, the financial, the emotional. I think sometimes folks don't quite understand how something can be financially abusive, right? We get calls all the time. He's making me work extra jobs. He keeps money away from me. He says I shouldn't divorce because he or she says I shouldn't divorce because the Bible says it's bad. And so all of these little things can be potentially harmful for relationships. But I think a big part of it, and what we're doing right now also, is educating and outreach and training to make sure that not just are we providing our free services, but we're educating, letting the community know that, hey, these are major red flags to be considered when you're in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Shane. Thank you so much for that addition, and actually segues to the next question that I was going to ask all of you. In many cases, domestic violence really began before the pandemic, but we know reports we've seen an increase during the pandemic and even now because many folks found themselves confined in their homes. Families are facing multiple stresses. And so my question to all of you, well, actually, it's a two-part question. The first question is really, and Shane, you begun to speak on this towards the end of your answer, was, what are some of those indicators that domestic violence is occurring? And then the second question after you answer that, actually, let's start with that first, and then we'll go to the second question. But yeah, what are some indicators that domestic violence is occurring in the relationship and in the home? Why don't we start with Beth on this one?
So I think a lot of the red flags, we all know that an unhealthy relationship looks like, and we, if there's power and control going on, as already mentioned. And the relationship seems to have a lot more say so in how things go, about what their partner is or isn't doing. A lot of it, a relationship between 14-year-olds where there's a lot of following somebody around, those things that might feel like love when you're those are unhealthy. I think a lot of people minimize what that control can look like. We talk a lot about financial abuse because we see that in almost all that end up at Weave in our safe houses, and people being told they have to work, not having any control over their own money, getting into debt, not knowing where the money is. That can be a big. Some couples can be highly volatile anyway, and fight times. The victim thinks that means that they're not a victim of domestic violence. Yeah, where does the power really lie? Are you really afraid of your partner? Because if you're, that's probably domestic violence.
Thanks, Beth. Thank you so much for sharing that. Laura, what are some indicators that DV, intimate partner violence, is occurring?
Yeah, I think it's important to, I think especially if you have, people that you love and people that you really care about. I think on the victim side, right? Like if someone is being victimized in an abusive relationship, some signs would be that, like, you've been in constant communication or consistent communication with them and contact with them, and then all of a sudden they're like MIA. Like, it's hard to reach them. These might be signs around isolation. Their partner might be isolating them, making sure that they aren't, being in contact with other people. You may recognize low self-esteem, maybe depression, maybe they're in fear of their lives. Those are all different indicators. And a lot of times, like what some of our panelists have already shared, that like majority of folks tend to just, see domestic violence as physical abuse. But, a lot of times, there's a lot more than just physical abuse that happens, right? There's emotional, mental, sometimes spiritual abuse that's happening, verbal abuse that's happening, but then they never receive physical abuse. And so then they don't recognize that they are in an abusive relationship. And so if you see holes in the walls, you see, destruction of property, that is also physical abuse too. But at the end of the day, like when an abuser continues to use abuse, cruel acts on a repeated and regular basis to maintain power and control over another person, it can be really hard to reach that person. And so definitely, check in on your friends, check in on your family, just to make sure that they do have outlets and they do have that point of contact of someone in case they really need support.
Thanks so much, Laura, and especially providing from the friend perspective, right? Not just like signs that you're saying. So I really, really appreciate that insight. Sheng and Melody, do you have anything else to add to this? The question is, what are some of the indicators that domestic violence is occurring in the relationship or is occurring?
Yeah, so a lot of times in the presentations that we do to our youth, they share obviously that they don't quite understand what it is. And then I'll say, okay, give me an example of when your partner was upset with you. And it starts out as little things. It's, oh, well, I have to ask permission to go shopping. I have to ask permission to do this. He tells me that I've eaten too much. And these little things that will add up, and these are all red flags. And as someone who's a friend and observing, it is important that you watch out for potentially more abusive behavior. And if this continues to be consistent, I think also just being aware of someone who is always right, like a potential abuser is always right. They don't really know how to apologize or when to even apologize. It's really important. So those are some indicators. And then also in the presentations that we do, we try to consider and try to open up to potential abusers. Hey, are you behaving in certain ways that might that your girlfriend or your boyfriend is complaining about, that you're too controlling? Be aware of your own behavior and be aware of the things that you're saying that could be viewed as abusive.
Thanks so much, Shane. Really provide also the work that you do with young people in terms of promoting healthy relationships and asking those questions to do a lot of reflection. So really appreciate those insights. Melody, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that everything that everybody has said so far has been really right on. I really appreciated what Laura said about isolation. I think that that's something that we don't always recognize when someone is retreating back into themselves, and think about what might be the cause of that. And I think the only other thing that I would add that also comes up in conversations with youth is when somebody uses jealousy as an excuse for their behavior. When somebody says that, well, I'm doing this because of the way that you acted. I'm doing this because you hung out with this person who I didn't want you to be with. And jealousy is an okay emotion to feel. We all feel jealous from time to time, but it's when someone uses that jealousy as an excuse for their unhealthy behavior that I would say it's a possible indicator of domestic violence.
Thank you so much, Melody. I know we almost transitioned a little bit in talking about those indicators, but also what makes a healthy relationship. So my follow-up question to all of you is, how can we promote more healthy relationships with our families and with loved ones? And what makes a healthy relationship? So why don't we start with Shane?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think at the end of the day, having a partner can add, right? To some folks have this belief that it can add value, and in some cases it does. But for you to be able, a healthy relationship is to be able to have your own life separate from outside of your relationship with your intimate partner. Being respectful, being compassionate. Disagreements are going to happen. You're not always going to 100% agree at all times, but being able to disagree without there being consequences or punishment for you. Someone who supports you and really motivates you to achieve personal goals. And then again, I think it all just boils back down to being able to be yourself, be your authentic self without having to ask for permission or being punished for being who you are.
Thank you, Shane. Melody?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about how you asked, like, how do we talk to folks about healthy relationships? How do we build healthy relationships? And for me, I think it's having conversations early. I think other folks on the panel have talked about this, but not being afraid to talk to our kids and to youth about what it means to be in a healthy relationship, about how to identify those warning signs of abusive relationships. I think a lot of people want to think that kids aren't dating. And even though they may not be dating, we want to give them those tools to be able to build healthy relationships as they get older. And so I think what Shing had to say was totally right on. Mutual respect, communication, compromise, compatibility. All of these things are really important when thinking about how to build a healthy relationship. And that goes for anybody of any age, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. These things are important for everyone.
Thank you, Melody. Thank you so much. Beth, do you have anything else to add?
Things. One is being able to communicate honestly with the person that you're in. And I just want to call out, we do a lot of work with youth in the schools and out of the schools. I tell you, they have a hard time identifying a healthy relationship that they've ever seen. And when we say, healthy relationships, we do an exercise, people in the media and famous people that have a healthy relationship. And I can tell Obama are usually the only people they can come up with that they think model that healthy behavior. A lot of input about unhealthy relationships from the media, and something we're battling as adults, trying to help them navigate moving into a healthy relationship. So that's what I would offer for all of us, is have those open with young people about what it should and could look like, rather than what they see modeled.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Beth. Laura?
Yeah, I think in a lot of conversations I've had with folks like loved ones, community members, and even clients, right? Um, and when they've come out of an abusive relationship, or even what they also term toxic relationships, unhealthy relationships, they're like, yeah, sometimes love just isn't enough, right? You can love the person, but sometimes that just also doesn't hold you together. And so in addition to love, right, when it is a healthy relationship, power is shared amongst both partners, right? Roles and responsibilities are shared. There's no hierarchy of inferiority or superiority. There is self accountability and the ability to hold each other accountable. There's commitment to change, but there's also a consistent and diligent effort and action in treating yourself and the other person better and healthier. There's also prioritization of each other's safety, of your own safety, mutual respect, like others folks has said, honoring each other's full autonomy, right? Allowing each other to make your own decision, and practicing and cultivating healthy boundaries. There is definitely, right, we always talk about communication, but there's also comprehension, right? Sometimes you can communicate, but if there's no willingness to comprehend each other, that could also be could lead to be very harmful too. And of course, approaching disagreements and misunderstandings as an opportunity to overcome and grow together, but then also being on the same page of the possibility of like breaking up and separation as an option, and that might be best for both partners to close out a relationship in a peaceful way. And so those are all other just ideas of what a healthy relationship is, but there's so much more, right? And everybody practices it differently. And so definitely look out for like what really works out for you and for the other person.
Thanks so much, Laura. That's like super informative. And as I'm sitting here thinking about just my relationships with loved ones, when you talk about it's about, the power is shared, it's about self-accountability, it's about your consistency in terms of your effort to be a better person in a relationship. It's also about prioritizing safety, each other's safety, right? I don't think these are things I'm just thinking about just growing up in my own family in life that we were taught, right? Because maybe we didn't see it. Maybe it's not something that our parents understood because they never also have seen healthy relationships. And so as you're like naming all these things, I'm like walking through all my relationships, like, am I practicing all of these things, right? Because yeah, incredibly, really insightful, and just really powerful. So thank you so much, Laura, for sharing some of those how would you say it, healthy boundaries. What are some indicators of healthy relationships that we all should be practicing? So thank you so much. The next question I have for all of you, as we're talking about indicators of DV occurring and what can we do to promote healthier relationships is, if someone is in a DV relationship or it's occurring, what are some steps that they can take to seek help, and what can we do to support community members that are experiencing domestic violence? Let's start with Laura.
Yeah. So if we have folks, right, that are, they're noticing there's abuse in the relationship and they are really looking for help and support, I think definitely this is something that we don't stress enough in our communities and even to each other about like safety planning. And it's a skill and a capacity and a practice that I would say we just need to do more of, so that everybody knows how to safety plan for themselves. And so even seeking help can be dangerous, right? I think if you look at all of our DV organizations and their websites, there's always a leave button, in case you're not in a confidential place and you need to leave the site quickly. But definitely think about what would be good times to call the crisis line at a local DV organization, or definitely think about who are the top 1 to 2 to 3 people that you can call on. Memorize their numbers, and that way if you are in a place where you need to make a phone call and you don't have your phone, or you don't have it on hand, that you can have it just to seek out and talk to someone. For those of us who are community members that aren't, experiencing harm, but we want to support others who are, that's also important for us to really be. Um, so we have this value called centering survivors, right? And what that means is that survivors, we give the power back to the survivor, whatever that they wanted to do, whatever that they decide to do, whatever it is that they feel like doing, right? That like we really just provide that space and support for them to make those decisions for themselves. And we say this because the survivor knows their abuser best. They know when the ticking bomb's going to go off. They know when are the times. And so at the end of the day, the survivor has to make that decision to because they're going to be living with the consequences. This is their life, right? And so as community members supporting victims and survivors, we really just got to be okay with supporting them in the decision that they're making, whether or not we agree with it, right? And so if they are choosing to stay with their abuser because that's the best decision that they are making for themselves in the moment, then we help them safety plan. We help them think through what are some things that you may need to prepare for in case you need to leave, right? If they do want to leave, right, then and you're like, okay, how do we leave in a safe way? Like this is where you can also bring in your advocates and your local DV organization shelters to really brainstorm and think about how to create that safe exit. And so I think a lot of times for those of us who've never been through domestic violence, never have done this work, right? It's always important to remember that leaving is, even though that's easy to say to our victims and survivors, it's actually the most dangerous. And so for us to remember that and to also remember giving full autonomy and power to the victim and survivor in making those decisions.
Thank you, Laura. Beth?
Yeah, I think I really want to put an exclamation point on what Laura just. I always tell people leaving is a process; it's not an event. And I think one thing to bear in mind, if it's someone who's watching or somebody who is supporting somebody, we have 4 core services that when they're leaving. First is calling a support and information or crisis line. I mean, that's where first acknowledge what's going on for them and get validated for what they're experiencing. Always, that's a safe, anonymous thing somebody can always do. We also offer, again, that's how a lot of people finally get the courage to leave, or at least to just process in a safe space. We offer legal services, get anything that can help somebody be safe when they leave, to protect themselves, their children, and their pets in custody, because many people stay because they're afraid of losing their children. And then safe shelter. Not everybody needs safe shelter, but especially these days when the situation is so tough and there just is not housing, even if people are it, having a safe place to live temporarily can be that's. Just know that between Weave and my sister's house and other organizations out there, their region, and I encourage anybody to reach out and see what might be the right thing.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you also just for providing the different services and resources that Weaves offer as well. And I know you all have been a really important organization, especially during the pandemic, supporting our families. So just thank you so much for even laying out the resources that Weave does provide. So, Shane?
Yeah, agreeing with everything that Beth and Laura has already said. On top of that, I like to add that, confide in someone, right? Laura mentioned that. Confide in someone. What is it? I think it's 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced intimate partner violence. And so you're not alone. And I think a big part of this is that so many survivors feel alone. We get calls all the time. Hey, is this domestic violence? Hey, is this normal? Hey, are there support groups? And the big message we do want to send is you're not alone. Chances are someone you're talking to, someone in your circle, many people in your circle have probably experienced domestic violence. And another big thing is that community members, we need to remember that not everyone comes with the same background, with the same traditions, with the same religious beliefs. And so making sure that we are aware that we also don't place any judgment on a survivor who's reaching out for help on, well, why didn't you leave sooner? Why didn't you call sooner? Why isn't there a police report? Take into consideration the different cultural barriers that prevent someone from getting help, and just be a support system for them. And one more thing to add also is that, like Melody mentioned, children are, we've got youth and teens that are dating and they're going to date, and we need to be prepared to have these age appropriate discussions with them and teach them what a healthy relationship looks like. As much as it may, as much as we don't want to discuss it, these conversations need to be had, right? For my sister's house, we also provide services for survivors of human trafficking, sexual assault. This is all intertwined. And so the sooner we can have these conversations, the sooner we can work together, continue to work together as a community to tackle these barriers and to really do more prevention work, the sooner we can really bond together, form this collaborative effort, and continue to work and build on that. So I think these are all things that we can do to just be more supportive for survivors.
Yeah. Thanks, Shane. And also really appreciate, I know that my sister house has a 24-hour multilingual helpline as well. So thanks so much, team, for putting that back up. And Shane, I think, and Melody spoke to this a little bit too, but really being brave enough to begin these conversation at a younger age with our loved ones and our young people, right? About what is a healthy relationship, so that we could prevent it in the first place. So thank you so much. Melody, would you like to add?
Yeah, sure. So I really wanted to kind of build off of a little bit what Shane was saying about making folks feel as if they're not alone. I think when it comes to what we can do as a friend, as a community member, is simply listen and believe them. A lot of times in these relationships, the person using abuse is saying things to them like, nobody is going to care that this is happening to you. Nobody is going to believe you. Nobody's going to think that I would treat you this way. Nobody's going to care about what's happening to you. And so even just doing those acts as simply as listening and believing can be a really big first step for folks to make them feel as if they do have some power that the person using abuse is making them feel as if they don't have. And so it's really easy for us to take those couple of steps, and then from there figure out how we can offer resources, how we can offer supports like everybody else on the panel has been talking about.
Thanks so much, Melody. Really appreciate your addition to all of the really great answers from our panelists. I know we're about to be done, so we do have one more question left. And this is really kind of want to leave it up to you, because today we talked about indicators of DV occurring, what can we do to promote healthy relationships? What can we do to support as individuals, as a community member? I think the question I have for all of you is, what is one thing that you would like people to take away from this conversation as folks are listening? If there's one thing at all that you want them to take away, obviously I would hope that everyone will absorb all of this like a sponge. But if there's one thing that you would like folks who are watching to take away from this conversation, what would it be for Domestic Violence Awareness Month? And we'll start with Beth.
Domestic Violence Action Month. Because we want people to do something, and not just my takeaway for folks is that you can do something. If somebody who's experiencing domestic violence, you're probably wrong. So you can educate your sources on our website, and I'm sure others do as well. Just learn more about what it might look like. If you think that you are experiencing either a ship or an abusive relationship, educate yourself. Just learn more about clear about what your options are and what supports there might be out there for you. But it's every solution in our community.
Thank you so much, Beth. Melody?
I think that something I would like folks to take away from this is just the idea that domestic violence is preventable. It's not something that's inevitable that has to happen to folks. We've been talking about the statistics about how many people are impacted, and it just doesn't have to be that way. And we all have a role to play in preventing domestic violence from happening. And I think included in that is, policy advocacy. As the partnership, for the last few years, we've been advocating to the governor and through the California state budget that we should have funding allocated to do prevention programming across California. And we've only had some success in trying to get those funds in order to pay for programs that are going to work towards preventing violence. And so when things come up like us asking about doing a budget ask about getting funding for domestic violence prevention programs, call your legislators, call the governor, let them know that this is something that's important so that we can really prioritize preventing this from happening in the first place.
Thank you so much, Melody. Also providing some tangible kind of next steps of what folks can do. So really appreciate that. Shane?
Big takeaway is domestic violence can really happen to anyone, right? We've assisted our survivors who are doctors, lawyers, teenagers, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle. So there are no barriers when it comes to who's experiencing this. So just keep that in mind. And then also, as Beth has mentioned, get involved, right? Volunteer. There's so many opportunities for you to get involved and to help with lowering these rates. And again, just keep in mind that sometimes DV can start as verbal abuse. It can start as making fun of what you're wearing and can lead to something more physical and could possibly lead to something as loss of life too. So, yeah.
Thank you, Shane. And Laura?
Yeah, I think this is something I should have also emphasized earlier about domestic violence, but it's also recognize that domestic violence is also systemic, right? And what that means is that an abuser's power and control over a victim or survivor is also connected to these different power systems of oppression that exist in our communities and our society. And so for us to also really think about those who have less power and privilege in our community and our society, those are the more vulnerable groups that are going to be experiencing domestic violence. And they may possibly also be re-victimized or re-traumatized again in our systems and institutions that are not survivor-centered and are not culturally responsive. So we're talking about folks who are limited in English, people with disabilities, persons of color, LGBTQ, immigrant, refugee, you name it, right? They probably, these groups are vulnerable in domestic violence and also barriers in seeking support because of sometimes our institutions do have those types of systemic barriers too. And so for us to be aware of our own power and privilege and using it responsibly and handling with care when we are providing support for victims and survivors.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you so much, Shane, Melody, and Beth. Really appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedule, again, to be in space with all of us. I think as you heard from many of our panelists, we all have a role to play in preventing domestic violence in our community. Laura talked a little bit just right now about the ways in which even how power operates within our systems, right? And Melody gave some concrete examples of ways that you could also get involved. Same thing with Beth and Shane, sharing how you can volunteer, right, with organization. You can advocate for more funding for this work, supporting organization like CHAN BOF, My Sister's House, Weave, and the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, really investing in these organizations who are our frontline warriors working with victims and survivors every single day. And so there's lots of ways to get involved and to be engaged. And also just begin courageous conversation with your loved ones. I think that's where it really starts at home, and being able to learn how to communicate with your loved ones and learning about ways that we could promote more healthy relationships. So again, I really just wanted to say thank you to all of you, Beth, Laura, Melody, and Shane. This work is hard. It's labor of love. And I hope that all of you are also taking time to take care of yourself as well. And not just in October, but like every single day, because even after October is done and Domestic Violence Action Month is gone, you all live and breathe this every single day. And so I just really want to thank each and every one of you for your service, your commitment to ensuring that our families and our communities are safe. And that they can really thrive and reach their full potential. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who has tuned in as well. Just a few announcements before we log off. I wanted to let you know that we have an upcoming event happening this weekend on Saturday, November 5th, the Meadowview Family Festival. This is a no-cost family event really designed to celebrate our diversity, promote health, and also, most importantly, help activate the 24th Street Bypass Park. So bring your friends, bring your families. You can bring your bike as well. There's going to be bike activities, multicultural performances, food, and lots of events happening. So it's a free event. Please stop by and join. Also wanted to let you all know that we also have a new community calendar as well. You can go to talkify.com/CMMyVang to get a layout of all of the great events happening in South Sacramento and District 8. So wanted to make sure that we share that with all of you. If you need to contact our office, you can also just do it the old school way and give us a phone call at 916-808-7008. If there's anything that you need regarding city services, what's happening, feel free to reach out to Team Heart and Hustle. We'll make sure to respond to you as soon as we can. You can call us again at the number that we provided here, 916-808-7008, or you can email district8@cityofsacramento.org. And lastly, you could, to get all the updates about what's happening, you could follow us on social media. Our handle is the same for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's at CMMyVang. That's CMMyVang on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you follow us on there, click follow, you'll get all the updates about what's happening in our community in South Sacramento. So with that, I really just want to take this time to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It is the last day of October 31st. If you do celebrate Halloween, please be safe out there tonight. And yes, stay warm as well. It's getting really chilly now. So make sure all of you are taking care of yourself. And until next time, we'll see you next month for our next monthly live chat. And I think that's it. Thank you so much, team. As you can see the information on the bottom of the screen, if you need to reach our office, you can call us at 916-808-7008 or email us at district8@cityofsacramento.org. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great week.